Work for Land Rover BAR, right? Okay. It's delightful to see something exciting like this at the end of the day when you're falling asleep and you spend all day at the exhibition. I hope you spend all day at the exhibition. We had some great exhibits out there today. If you missed anything, another chance tomorrow, another chance Thursday. My name is Richard Soley. I'm Executive Director of the Industrial Internet Consortium, in case you missed me this morning. And we're part of the team with Fiera de Barcelona putting together this event. And it's my great pleasure to welcome Martin Whitmarsh. Martin is the Chief Executive Officer of Land Rover BAR. And even if you haven't heard of them, you've probably heard of his previous organization, which was the McLaren Formula One group. He likes to go fast, apparently. I like that picture, actually. I'm not sure that's a sailboat when it's not actually in the water, is it, Martin?
No, that's the idea. The challenge for us as we go into America's Cup is these boats will stay dry. The idea is that we cross the line, start flying, we reach to the first mark, we go up and down the race course against them with the wind, and then over to the finish line. So that's the challenge. Clearly, the boats are much quicker out of the water. These boats, rather counterintuitively, will be travelling at over 3 times the speed of wind. They'll be moving at about 85 kilometres an hour in Bermuda next year.
Where do you have the jet? Is that actually
no jet. The engine is a wing. So the engine is a wing. It's the same size as a Boeing 737. And that really produces the thrust that's pushing this boat along. So it's simple physics, although, as I say, counterintuitive, but it's going at over 3 times the speed of the wind that's pushing it.
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit, for the people that didn't raise their hand a moment ago, tell us a little bit about the history of Land Rover BAR.
Okay, so perhaps put it in context. It's strange at a technology fair to talk about maybe the 19th century, but in 1851, Queen Victoria challenged, and the Royal Squadron challenged the world to a sailing contest. A beautiful trophy was made, an iconic trophy, in fact the oldest international sporting trophy in the world, now 165 years old. It was commissioned from Garrett's, the Royal Jewellers, the 1,000 Guinea Trophy. And this contest was to sail around an island just off the south coast of the UK, the Isle of Wight. In the first contest in 1851, there were 13 British boats, 1 foreign boat turned up from America, called America, and it basically kicked our butt and took that trophy back to America.
But it's only 150 years, I'm sorry.
Well, in fact, 165 years, and in 165 years, America has generally retained it. It was won briefly by Australia, New Zealand, and ironically a landlocked country like Switzerland. But in all that time, this great seafaring nation of Great Britain has never won the America's Cup. So Land Rover BAR was created a couple of years ago as a campaign to really right that wrong. As a team of people that we're committed to bringing the Cup back to Great Britain. In order to do that, as you can see, the world has changed in sailing. Rather unexpectedly, during the course of the last America's Cup, which was held in San Francisco 2013, the boats started to fly, and really that changed. That became, quite a seminal moment for America's Cup. It really changed the world as far as sailing was concerned. And so our challenge now is to really, we're going to have the best sailor, the best team. But ordinarily, in the history of America's Cup, the quickest boat wins. So fundamentally, we're a technology business that's there to design the quickest race boat in the world.
So, okay, you just started to explain what you're doing in an IoT show. That's a little strange. What's IoT about this? I mean, is there some data analysis? Is there something? What's going on that makes it IoT?
Well, inevitably, you're looking for the sort of eureka moment of change and innovation, but actually, in this sport, as in many technology sports, it's generally about lots of incremental improvements. In order to set about try to find those, we have to collect data. I think it's been mentioned, we have about 400 different sensors on that boat, which are monitoring performance, strain, stress, the sailors themselves, and we're collecting all of that data, our analytic processes are also creating data. So, like many organizations, we have the ability to create a heck of a lot of data, but the real trick, the real clever piece, is if we can piece that together, we can dissect that information to actually be able to make smart decisions. And that's like any business. So we have a business where effectively we're going to war. You know, we have an immovable time frame. We've got to turn up for the first race. We can't slide the program by 3 months. We've got to be there racing. And we've got to throw everything we can at it to be the best technology. And so we're collecting lots of data, and we've got to make decisions. We've got to make decisions with the data we collect at that mission control is being sent back by telemetry from the boats. Wherever we are with the boats in the world, we collect it at our technical centre. We've got to make decisions about how we develop and improve the boat fundamentally. Then, when we get racing, we need to make decisions day by day based on the meteorological information about sea state, weather. So we've got to put the components, we've got to tune that boat to have it ready for the given conditions. So that's a day-by-day decision making. And then in the race itself, we've got to give the tactician on board the boat good tactical information, so second by second making information. So we have these, if you like, 3 time domains. For us, they're all pretty short, you know, so this is week by week, making decisions to improve and develop the boat. Day by day, making sure we've refined it for the given conditions, and then second by second, during the race itself, deciding when we're going to attack, jibe, what our competitors are doing. And all that means that we've got to be able to make smart decisions, we've got to make them quickly, which means we've got to mine the information, the data that we've got available, and present it to the right people at the right time to let them make the right decision.
Well, it sounds like actually not all of the decision making is on the boat as it was 165 years ago. So there's a lot of decision making that's made back in a data center somewhere.
Yeah, that's right. So certainly, you know, we've got what's known as mission control, which I referred to here. All of the data comes back to our technical center. So as live whilst the boat is sailing, we're monitoring, you know, the health and condition of it. Are we about to break something? The performance of it, what the sailors are doing. We want to be able to make smart decisions. You know, have wearable technology on the sailors so that we're knowing what they're doing. We're concentrating on that man-machine interface. We've got on board 6 sailors. We've got a choreograph. When we're flying, as we are, you will notice that the boats are flying on one hydrofoil. The windward hydrofoil is out of the water. To make a manoeuvre, we've got to go through all of the things you do on a conventional boat, plus drop a hydrofoil, raise the other one, dance effectively from one to the other, move a crew from one side of the boat to another, and they've all got to do things at the right time. When they arrive at the grinding station, that grinding pedestal, which is where we provide or produce from human efforts the hydraulic power that's controlling all these control systems, we want the wearables to be telling that grinding station who's arrived, whether it's 1 or 2 sailors, set the cadence, set the direction where we're feeding that energy to various systems on the boat. So all those things are happening. And then, as I say, the helmsman is being guided by a tactician to make tactical decisions during the race, second by second, to make sure we're out racing our competitors.
So all of today we've been hearing about transformational changes of various different industries, of healthcare, of manufacturing, of transportation, and so forth. This sounds transformational. Are you seeing it in competing boats as well? I mean, is it the whole industry transforming?
Yeah, it has to, because I think it's like a lot of industry. We're accelerating. Technology is causing an acceleration. For many years, America's Cup was a fantastic sporting occasion. It happened every 4 or 5 years, and development pace was an order of magnitude or 2 slower than it is today. There's such technical boats, and the information, the data logging, the telemetry, the data that we have is much richer, much more important, and therefore the pace at which we need to. We have to identify what are the key technical differentiators, where at the end of the day, these are, when we look back on hopefully a successful campaign and we win the America's Cup, what are the things that we've done that have caused us to win? There's a number of hygiene factors. We're up against 5 other great teams, 5 other nations competing for this America's Cup. There are many things that they will do just as well as us, and they won't be the differentiators. The key thing with, we've got a finite amount of resource. We've got about 140 people, which are a technology business. It's quite a small company, and therefore we've got to make sure that we're directing the effort where we get the biggest bang for our buck, the best return. And those are the areas that are going to be the technical differentiators. They're the things that are going to differentiate our boat, its performance, the ability of our crew to extract the performance from that boat from our competitors.
So you talk a lot about data analysis that was applied in almost everything you just said. Any big surprises? I mean, is there something that came out of that data analysis that allowed you to change your business in other transformational ways?
Well, again, there's the overall development of the boat, but I think one of the things that happened, traditionally America's Cup would have what was known as chase boats. You can see some of them in the background there. And these have been boats that follow around, watching, recording, looking at the data. Firstly,
people as they fall overboard.
and also collect people that fall overboard. But I think what we noticed here is one, we're getting a lot more data. Two, it's uncomfortable to follow these boats. Sure. If you've got to race around at 80 kilometers an hour to follow a boat and try and work and collect data. So by the telemetry systems getting that data back to mission control, we've been able to position more of our engineers in frankly, a better environment, but a more efficient environment, because clearly racing lots of chase boats around at 85 kilometers an hour, burning fuel, burning resource is much more efficient to do. We didn't set out to do this, but actually we've realised that we're a sustainable business. It's been a real key message for us that we can collect data, have people working back at base. We don't have to move them around the world. We don't have to chase around at high speed behind boats. We can do that analysis back in the labs, as it were. And that wasn't something we thought of. We were just chasing performance, but it just arose, and it really is something that's quite significant in operation in terms of the efficiency with the manner in which we develop these boats.
Fantastic. So it's racing plus ameliorating climate change. Yeah. Okay. So how does this connect to your background? I mean, there've got to be lessons that you learned in the F1 space that found their way into the coding.
Yeah. I mean, I'm new to this. I'm not a sailor, so I'm in a team of 139 sailors plus me. So it's an interesting environment with lots of enthusiasm. But I was very fortunate. I spent 25 years in Formula One. I joined Formula One back in the end of the 80s, and we were a small Formula One team. In the case of the business I was involved with, we were about 80 people going Formula One racing. But actually, that became a technology arms race, and we frankly, with the OEMs the automotive OEMs being involved, we had a lot of money to try and go out there and differentiate ourselves. So, I think what we're seeing now in America's Cup is, we are the Formula One on the sea, and I think we're able to bring across a lot of the lessons learned. I mentioned mission control. McLaren was the first Formula One team to do that. We were racing around the world, and we were taking armies of engineers all over the world to support these very complex and sophisticated racing cars. And we were operating in hot and sticky circumstances of wherever we were, to be able to then realise that at the speed of light we can get that data back, we can run our computer simulations back at PAM, as it were. It became a much more efficient way of operating, and progressively McLaren did it first. All of the Formula One teams do that. The whole development of simulation and analysis started at McLaren. That's very much copied across the Formula One teams. And developing analysis tools, as I mentioned, Formula One teams and America's Cup teams were always looking for this big eureka moment, this big breakthrough, this big jump. But actually, clearly, there's a set of regulations that bound us to some extent.
Sure.
And I think we should always have our eyes open, our heads being squeezed to think about how we can find those eureka moments. But typically, in my experience in Formula One, certainly in the last decade or two, the winning team at the end was the one that found those tiny fractions of percent performance increments and just kept piling them onto the product and finding that performance. And so if you're trying to find fractions of percent of performance improvement, then you've got to develop and hone the analysis systems, the testing systems, and all of that data analytics that have a resolution and a fidelity that can find fractions of percent of performance differentiation. And if your systems aren't sufficiently well developed to do that, then you're flying blind. You're hoping, but if you want these small increments of improvements, you really have to have that level of fidelity in the systems, and that's really what Formula One was developing, and it's what we're now developing. So it's, of course, I think it's exciting to think of some of the breakthroughs, and foiling was one of those big breakthrough moments, and we're watching our competitors, they're watching us. we're seeing, we're trying to be that creative, but actually the creativity that we have is those the systems and the process and the analytics to capture performance, and then get it bolted onto the boat and keep doing that, help our sailors to be able to do these things. As I mentioned, ultimately, the engineers, we love finding raw performance, but you have to, just as with racing drivers, you've got to convince them that they can brake that late and they can turn in that fast. On these boats, it's the same. They've got to have tremendous conviction. We're giving them inherently unstable machines.
Right.
We're not allowed to have closed-loop control systems. As engineers, we'd love to be able to fly these things on autopilot, but that would detract from the sporting spectacle. So we're giving them something that's super critical, very difficult to sail, and it's that, then we've got to give them the information, really the various cues that we can to actually make sure that they can fly that boat or drive that car right on the outer limits of the performance envelope.
I love the story of actually moving from cars to boats, and it sounds like Alan Mulally, who spent his whole career at Boeing until he moved to the head of Ford. I mean, a big change. What about any of that technology coming back to the Formula One space? I mean, do you see yourself going back there, and do you see some of the technology? Well, sorry, I shouldn't have asked that. I mean, we're probably not going to use a hydrofoil on a Formula One car.
But I think what we're seeing, if you look at what happened in Formula One, Formula One became, and all racing is a fantastic hotbed to develop technology quickly. The whole organisation is very focused on performance. To get performance, generally it's about efficiency. We think about top speed, we think about manoeuvrability, acceleration. In order to do those things, it's about efficiency. So clearly, if you can develop efficient technical solutions, you can feed those back into mainstream. So the development of cross-fly tyres, fuel injection, variable cam timing, ABS systems, traction control systems. They all happened actually in Formula One, driven by performance, and then they've gone out into the cars that we drive today. I think if you now look at boats, hydrofoiling is a technology that's been around for a long time, but actually
in fact, it sort of started with the keels on the boats down under in the era.
They weren't strictly speaking hydrofoiling, but hydrofoiling is really creating lift to get the boat out of the water. We're in the extreme form of that, just as Formula One is an extreme segment of automotive. But the fact is that most boats are quite inefficient because they've got huge viscous drag. They're dragging very big. They have displacement to carry the mass, and they're dragging the surface area of that displacement around in water. As we see, as soon as we can get up onto the hydrofoils, the acceleration, you feel it. When you're on one of these boats, they accelerate with the power of this enormous wing, but then suddenly it takes off, and then you feel this second wave of acceleration. You can tangibly feel the reduction in drag and the increase in efficiency. So I think now, I think hydrofoiling will now come of age. It's become in sailing. Everyone now, in every form of sailing, competitive sailing, wants to be some form of hydrofoiling, whether they're monohulls, multi-hulls as we have. And I think it's clear that we've got the opportunity now to bring hydrofoiling and control systems back into the maritime sector, finding, and by that means we'll actually make much more efficient means of transporting ourselves across the oceans. And it's the same with the wings. These wings that we have on these vehicles, they're much more efficient than sails. And already people are looking at freight being carried on vessels that have wings, which you can trim and obviously reduce the fuel load. So again, all these things come back to, if you can make something that's efficient, you get performance, but you can also actually be more efficient, burn less fuel, save money, be more sustainable, and that's something that I think this sport can do. I think sport is such a stimulus for engineers. It's such an exciting environment,
sure.
and it really pushes people. And I think with our partners that we're proud to have people like Dell, EMC, Land Rover as partners, and they bring technology to us. They broaden our capability, but actually, I think we can also demonstrate to them lessons in how a very focused development organisation with time frames that don't change, very performance driven, we can actually really be a hotbed for developing technologies, and that those processes can go back into those bigger organisations, which are always striving to bring things to market quicker to actually have something that's focused on the need of their consumer. You know, our customer are 6 sailors pedaling around on one of these devices, but we're very focused on giving them performance. And I think that's it, that stimulates our organisation to make sure we deliver technology and performance quickly.
So I have to ask this question. I mean, after Formula One, 85 kph doesn't sound that impressive. It must be boring as hell.
Well, again, it's quite strange. I mean, I could never fit into Formula One cars, but I did get into a few of our sports cars, and I used to enjoy those things. And I was around. I've been around Formula One long enough to be deaf, complete deaf in one ear and half deaf in the other. But I think now you get on these boats and you're very conscious of speed and power. And I've been very fortunate. There's enough space on there I can climb on. I've been on one of the boats in Chicago when we were racing. I was sat on the back of a boat. The excitement of these boats, the speed which they travel, you've got 4 tons of equipment and people hurtling around, flying along the surface, above the surface of the water.
Fulfills the need for speed.
It feels pretty quick, and certainly, someone as a non-sailor on board, my number one sensation is self-preservation, not making an idiot of yourself and not falling off the back, that's all 3 of those things are quite challenging when you're on the back of one of these boats.
I think those are challenges worth meeting. Thank you, Martin. A pleasure.
Okay, pleasure.